Well, welcome back. We have a lot of developing stories this morning. The Biden administration is announcing new sanctions on Russian oligarchs and their families. A total of 8 Russian elites facing full blocking sanctions. This includes Russian President Vladimir Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, 19 oligarchs and 47 relatives and associates hit with visa restrictions. Joining me right now is the chairman of the Human Rights Foundation. He is the author of Winter is Coming, Garry Kasparov. And Garry, you wrote Winter is Coming a long time ago, and it certainly feels like it has arrived 2 weeks ago. Your assessment of what has taken place so far in Ukraine.
Yes, winter is here now, and it's a result of our lack of actions to stop Vladimir Putin, who started this war ages ago. It's not just now when his troops are trying to destroy Ukraine, but you can go all the way back to 2007 when he made his speech at the Munich Security Conference in Europe, talking about the future with spheres of influence, hell with international treaties. It's time for the big guys, big countries to dictate to small countries how to run their affairs. Unfortunately, it was missed. And after his invasion of Republic of Georgia in 2008, Obama administration gave him this disastrous reset policy, and it gave Putin time to consolidate. And then in 2014, he began his plan of dismembering and destroying Ukraine, which was always the country standing on his way to restore Russian domination in the former Soviet Union or even beyond that. And then after feckless Obama, we got the reckless Trump, who had personal admiration for strong men like Putin and dislike for international institutions like NATO and the EU. And that made him perfect partner for Putin, willing or not. And now with Biden administration, well, I have to admit, we all expected Biden to restore American leadership. Putin also felt that he could move further because despite aggressive rhetoric, the actions of these administrations were way less than was needed to send Putin a message and prevent a new war.
Well, Garry, it's been all economic sanctions that this administration is putting forth. No change at all in the fact that we import Russian oil, and Vladimir Putin uses it as a weapon. Putin has signaled that he's determined to continue this war. He said yesterday that the invasion of Ukraine was, quote, going according to plan, and that Russia is achieving its goals. What specifically do you want to see to stop Putin and take us behind Vladimir Putin? What do you think his next move will be?
First of all, it's not going according to the plan. The plan was very simple: take Kiev in 2 or 3 days, install a Russian puppet government, and then negotiate with the West from the position of strength. That was Putin's plan. It failed due to heroic resistance of Ukrainian forces that proved that Russian military is another Potemkin village. But after failing to take Kiev and the second biggest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, Putin decided to destroy Ukraine. And now we are all facing the war crimes on an industrial scale. And the most powerful military alliance in the history, NATO, is standing by. And you're right. Yes, it's while the sanctions have been announced, so there's still many loopholes. And of course, energy is one of the key elements. And we did, I'm saying we, the Renew Democracy Initiative, we did a website, fightforukraine.org, to track the sanctions and to see who is actually doing more or what. And I have to say that despite this aggressive rhetoric, Biden administration is lagging behind Europe. And it's very important not to send just a message to Putin and to warn him. It's too late. These sanctions could have stopped him 6 months ago, and of course 8 years ago when he annexed Crimea. But right now, Ukraine needs more. We need interference NATO interference to secure a no-fly zone, because otherwise Putin would go beyond that. It's the only talk about escalation is just useless, because Putin will escalate. He is enjoying now watching that the disaster in Ukraine, its humanitarian catastrophe, millions of refugees, thousands and thousands of innocent civilians being killed, and nobody can stop him. That's for him a demonstration of his strength. By the way, Maria, please, don't call Putin Russian president. I think it's an insult to Russian people, and it's also insult to the title. He's a brutal dictator, and he should be called so.
Yeah, it's a great point to make. I want to get your take on China and what this means for Xi Jinping in a minute. But first, take us more into the mind of Putin. You yourself went up against Vladimir Putin. I remember you for years have been calling out the evil, calling out his behavior. He even, his thugs put you in jail a couple of years ago. So what do you think his, sentiment will be? He's a pariah already, right? But is he irredeemable for the rest of the world? What happens now? And do you think he's mentally challenged? I mean, what is he thinking, creating this global disaster potential?
I think he's irredeemable, and I think we should forget, about Putin in the long term, because he believes that he's above the law. It's not by accident that his favorite characters from history are Joseph Stalin and Ivan the Terrible. And he wants to prove to the world that violence can be used by a brutal dictator with nuclear weapon anywhere and at any time he wants. And that's why what we need now is to make sure that people around him, the Russian generals, Putin's cronies and henchmen, will recognize that the world is serious, because this is existential threat. He will not stop in Ukraine. If he's not stopped in Ukraine, he'll go further, because dictators never stop until they're being stopped. And you did mention China. It's for those who think, maybe we can, give Putin Ukraine and nothing happens. Despite the fact that, it's not the case, and he will move to the Baltics and will force NATO to get in, China is also watching very, very closely. If Putin succeeds in Ukraine, Taiwan is next, because the free world has to show now that is ready to oppose this rise of new dictatorships that are threatening the very existence of the world order that we used to live in.
Yeah, well, they want a new world order. China, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin in Russia. So, Garry, do you believe that the Baltic states right now are vulnerable? Will he move to the Baltics once he takes down Kyiv, which is his near-term goal?
Absolutely. So he will move to the Baltics or the Poles because he wants escalation. That's a normal, quote unquote, of course, development of any dictatorship. Putin's domestic policy failed, but he needs this foreign aggression to demonstrate his invincibility. Now we still can fight him while the Ukrainian army is strong enough to repel Russian attacks. But if he moves to the Baltics, and if Xi Jinping moves to Taiwan, then we need boots on the ground. So it's no matter what is being said, on many channels, including Fox, warning us against further escalation and engagement with Putin militarily. This is not a war of our choosing. But unfortunately, we have no choice to demonstrate that the free world is strong enough to repel Putin's attacks on our civilization.
And real quick, Garry, on Taiwan, do you expect an invasion from China? What is your take about this relationship between Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and don't forget, Iran has been brought into the fold as well. They were doing military exercises, the three of them, and the U.S. is trying to get this administration trying to get the U.S. back into an Iran nuclear deal.
The Iranian nuclear deal was a disaster, from day one, and it could be even worse. But every dictator in the world is now watching Ukraine, trying to figure out what they can do next. Because dictators never ask why, they always ask why not. And of course, Xi Jinping's policy towards Taiwan will depend on the outcome of the war in Ukraine. Those are not, relations that are being presented very often as partnership. Putin is a definitely junior partner in his coalition, and he's doing a lot of bidding for Xi Jinping. By the way, Xi Jinping never recognized Putin's territorial gains in Ukraine, while Putin already recognized Taiwan as a part of China. So the Chinese attack on Taiwan in the future depends very much on Putin's success or failure in Ukraine. That's why the battle in Ukraine, it's a battle for the future of our world. It's a front line of freedom now.
Oh, wow. All really important points and analysis. Garry, great to talk with you this morning. Thank you. Please don't be a stranger. Come back soon. Garry Kasparov joining us this morning. Thank you, Garry.